Alright folks, here's the finished painting of a redwood tree in a redwood forest. And I painted this on location, of course. As you can see, I'm there down in the dirt, hunching over. But this one was pretty challenging because it was very windy in this location. As you can see there with my left hand, my index finger, I'm holding down the page because the wind was actually blowing from behind me, and it was blowing up the page as I was drawing it and before I was beginning to paint. So I have to use my finger to hold the paper down while I'm painting. And you can see all the light shining onto the page and stuff. I apologize for that, but that's how it is when you're out on location. I mean, I'm trying to use my own shadow to kind of block that light. But anyway, I started out with some transparent red oxide, basically, maybe a touch of ultramarine blue. And now I'm using just a damp brush with no pigment, and I'm just creating a highlight area, taking off some pigment, and now I'm adding in some of the shadows on this tree. So I'm kind of keying in this tree just slightly, getting in some midtones. These are going to end up being the midtones for the most part. But just trying to figure out a little bit of where I'm going to go with this tree and what the colors and values are going to be. There's so many different ways to start a watercolor painting. Sometimes you can just do washes over the entire thing, start out very light. For me, I try to paint very directly from what I've, taken note of myself and how I go about these watercolor sketches and paintings. I just go for it, man. I go for whatever value it's going to be. I try to go for that for the most part. Here I'm painting wet into wet. Really getting some shadows in the foreground there. And really trying to maintain the light and highlights there as well. You can see I'm scrubbing out some of the pigment, trying to create some interesting dappled light shapes in the shadows. But it all kind of disappears anyway once it dries a bit. And I'm coming in with a real yellow green here. These are the leaves that are getting hit with the most light. And they end up being very warm. So that's what I'm, very light, very warm. And now I'm blending that into some of the cooler greens around. With the painting above it, that was the first one I did right before this one, and I really learned a lot from that one. And with this one, I'm really trying to simplify much more than the painting above it. So with the greenery here, I'm blocking it in, man. I'm going simple, using a number 9 filbert brush, kind of a larger brush. So I put some dark pigment down, and then I go in and wipe off the brush, and then I take some of the pigment out, and this gives me some subtle variation in variety, value, and color within an area. So here I realized I need to just block in all the greenery, and then I can worry about I can add shadows on top of that, and here I'm going to pull out some of the highlight areas. So I'm kind of killing two birds with one stone by doing this. I'm putting in the lights and the midtones in one go, basically. So I don't have to do two different layers. Now I'm coming back in, adding in some of the, either midtones or shadows here. Most likely some shadow shapes at least. And I'm starting to slow down now, being a little more careful because this is my focal point. So I got to be very careful here not to make a mistake, not to put a dark stroke in the wrong area, because the darker you go, you're not going to be able to get that off the paper if you mess up. So the beginning stages, it was fine. I can play around, have some fun, use a larger brush. And then, once I get to the second stage of layering, kind of the shadows, midtones, reflected lights, I got to slow down a little bit here. Really pay attention to my focal area. Try to compose the scene a bit. But overall, just try not to make any, you know, blatant errors in strokes and stuff on accident by going too quickly. But I'm not trying to get super detailed either. I'm simplifying what's in front of me. Just trying to get some subtle variety here. You know, it's really that color variation and value variation, these subtle changes that really creates like a realistic image overall. So I'm just trying to work in some transitions here between the shadows and the light. So that's more the midtones and things. And this is where I'm adding, you know, little bits of shadow texture in the bark and stuff, you know, just trying to suggest some bark and texture on this magnificent giant redwood tree. This thing is huge. It's probably anywhere from 15 to 20 foot diameter. And this is actually the very first tree that I ever painted in plein air a few years back. I did it in oils, water-based oils, water mixable oils. So it was kind of cool to be able to paint this in watercolor as well. And I'm really happy with how it came out. So I got the tree pretty much how I want it. You know, I got some shadows in there, some midtones, really nice. And now I'm going to let that dry, and I'm moving into the greenery now since the greenery has dried. So I like to hop around on my painting a little bit from time to time. You know, I work wet on dry for the most part. You know, in the very beginning stages, it's all wet into wet. And for the most part here, I work wet on dry. But, you know, I mix a bunch of different techniques. I do wet into wet as well. You know, it just depends on what I'm painting and what the scene calls for. You know, if there's a variety of color, then yeah, I'm going to use different colors while everything is still wet. But this is just doing some shadows in the greenery, so not a whole lot of variation here as far as color goes. So here I'm suggesting, you know, leaves and greenery, and I'm trying not to be detailed about it. I'm trying to just suggest that complexity, and I don't want it to take away from my main focal point. So what I'm doing here is adding some splatters, which is really fun to do. So you just get a lot of water and color on your brush, and then I kind of just tap it against my finger, and then paint little splatters just go everywhere. So it adds some painterly quality to the sketch, I feel, to the paintings, and it's a lot of fun, man, because it just it adds some spontaneity, whatever the word is. You know, it makes it look more spontaneous, more lively. And sometimes I forget to do that in these sketches, which is fine. Some of them don't really need it, but I really enjoy doing it. It's just a lot of fun, man, and it's always fun to see like what the outcome is going to be after you do the splatters, because it's such a uncontrollable thing. So I try to mix these kind of controlled looking strokes and stuff with, you know, uncontrolled splatters and stuff. It's just a lot of fun, man. I definitely recommend just trying it out, giving it a shot, and seeing if you like it or not. It may not look good on every single thing. Like, yeah, if you're doing like a really detailed portrait or just a portrait in general, yeah, you might not want to put like splatters on someone's face, you know, black, dark splatters. But if you're doing like a landscape or something, or a cityscape, you know, it might just add a little bit of grunginess or something. You know, adding a bit more here, trying to get them. Sometimes if the painting's wet and you put some splatters down, they kind of just blend into the painting. So sometimes I add a little bit more to try to get them to come across. And now I'm just doing some very small touches here, about to wrap up the end of this painting, softening some edges. And I really like the contrast of this painting and how it came out. And there is the finished painting sketch. Be sure to check out my other tutorial videos for drawing and painting. Also, subscribe to see future episodes. Peace.